Okay, so have you ever been in one of those situations where you think you're totally killing it? Like you're acing a job interview or you're charming on a first date, and then later you realize you totally misread the whole vibe. Turns out it's not always about what we say, but how we say it. So that's what we're diving into today, the fascinating world of nonverbal communication. And our guide for this journey is Jeanne Segal's book, The Language of Emotional Intelligence. Let me tell you, this book is packed with insights. It's already got me seriously rethinking how I interact with everyone. One of the biggest aha moments for me was Segal's emphasis on early attachment. It's like how we learn to communicate as babies. All those cries and coos and cuddles actually sets the stage for our communication patterns as adults. It's wild. I mean, think about it. Babies can't talk, right? But they're total masters of nonverbal cues. They're completely reliant on facial expressions and body language and, of course, that, signature baby cry to get their needs met.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Segal argues that how caregivers respond to those early cues actually shapes the way our brains wire for connection later in life. She calls this the attachment bond, and it's like the blueprint for how we navigate relationships,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to handling stress and conflict. It's mind-blowing to think that those early experiences, the ones we barely even remember, can have such a lasting impact. Segal even have this case study in the book about this couple, Stephen and Stephanie. And on the surface, they seem like the perfect match. But their relationship just kept hitting these roadblocks. And when you dig a little deeper, you see how their early attachment experiences played a huge role in their communication breakdowns. For example, Stephen was raised in a family where emotions were kind of brushed aside. So he grew up uncomfortable expressing his feelings, and he'd often just shut down during arguments. Stephanie, on the other hand, had a more emotionally expressive upbringing. So she really craved that open communication. So they were constantly clashing because their communication styles were just fundamentally different. It really made me think about my own early experiences. I remember being a pretty sensitive kid, and my family was always super supportive and encouraging. So I guess that's why I'm so chatty now. But seriously, this whole attachment thing got me thinking, how much of my current communication style is rooted in those early experiences? It's pretty wild to consider. But here's the good news. Even if our early attachment experiences weren't ideal, we can still learn to be more emotionally intelligent communicators. And that's exactly what Segal lays out in her book. She outlines these 5 essential skills that honestly are game changers for anyone who wants to build stronger, more fulfilling relationships. And these skills are managing stress, emotional awareness, nonverbal communication, playfulness, and conflict resolution. And we're going to dive into each skill in detail, but let's start with managing stress. Because let's be real, when we're stressed out, we're not exactly our best selves, right? It's all those subtle nonverbal cues fly right out the window. And Segal makes this brilliant analogy. She compares our stress response to driving a car.
So some people, when they get stressed, they're going to slam on the gas. They get angry, agitated, can't sit still, those types. Others slam on the brakes. They shut down withdrawal zone out completely. And then there are those who hit both pedals at once, creating this tense, frozen state where they can't think straight or take any action. I'm definitely a gas pedal person. Remember that time I completely flubbed that presentation at work? Yeah, my stress response went into overdrive. My palms were sweating, my voice was shaky, and I probably talked a mile a minute. I was so focused on my own anxiety that I completely missed the cues from the audience, the bored looks and stifled yawns. But here's the thing that Segal emphasizes. Once you recognize your own personal stress pattern, are you a gas pedal, brake, or both pedals person? You could actually start to change it. It's about becoming what she calls a stress-busting detective.
And what this means is figuring out what sensory inputs, quickly bring your nervous system back into balance. It could be music, aromatherapy, going for a run, whatever works for you. For me, it's definitely getting out in nature. A walk in the park, listening to the birds, feeling the sun on my face. That's my reset button. Now, once you've got a handle on your stress levels, you can start tuning into your own emotions, which is the foundation for emotional awareness. It's not just about knowing what you're feeling, though. It's about understanding why you're feeling it and how those feelings are impacting your interactions with others. Segal has this example in the book about a woman named Irene who comes home from a super stressful day at work and just snaps at her partner Alex. And he hadn't even done anything wrong. But Irene was so caught up in her own stress that she wasn't even aware of how her emotions were affecting her communication. And this is where it gets tricky. Because when we're not in touch with our own emotions, we're basically walking around with these blinders on, completely missing the emotional cues from the people around us. We might think we're communicating clearly, but our nonverbal signals can be saying something totally different. Which brings us to nonverbal communication itself, the real meat of this deep dive. It's everything from eye contact and body language to tone of voice and even touch. It's like this secret language we all speak, and when you start to understand it, you could unlock whole new levels of connection. Think about it. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone's words are saying one thing, but their body language is screaming something completely different? Yeah, we've all been there. It's like that time I was on a date, and the guy kept saying how much fun he was having, but he was fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, and constantly checking his phone. His nonverbal cues were totally betraying him.
So how do we get better at speaking and understanding this nonverbal language? Well, Segal gives tons of practical tips, and we're going to delve into those next. But before we do, I want to leave you with this question. What are your go-to stress busters? The ones that help you stay calm, cool, and collected, even when life throws you a curveball? Because let's be real, managing stress is the first step to becoming a more emotionally intelligent communicator. All right, so we've talked about managing stress, like hitting that reset button before we even try to communicate effectively. But now let's dive into some specific nonverbal techniques that can really up our communication game. Drawing on Segal's insights, of course. And she gives tons of practical tips, and one of the most important is eye contact. It sounds simple, right? But think about it. Have you ever talked to someone whose eyes were darting all over the place? It's distracting. It makes you feel like they're not really listening, and it definitely doesn't build trust.
On the flip side, sustained eye contact. Not like creepy staring, but that genuine engaged look. It shows that you're present, you're listening, and you care about what the other person is saying. It's like a subtle way of saying, I see you, I hear you, and what you have to say matters to me. Powerful stuff, right? But eye contact is just the tip of the iceberg. Segal also emphasizes the importance of body language, like how we hold ourselves, how we move. Even the smallest gestures can speak volumes. For example, think about someone with closed-off body language, arms crossed shoulders, slumped gaze averted. It sends a clear message. Stay away, I'm not interested, I'm not approachable. Now contrast that with someone who's got an open posture, relaxed shoulders, and a genuine smile. They're basically radiating warmth and approachability, inviting you to connect. It reminds me of the sales training I went to a few years back. The instructor was talking about how our body language can literally make or break a deal. He told a story about Arlene, who was this top salesperson, but she was struggling to close this big client. Turns out, Arlene had this habit of unconsciously tensing up whenever she talked about money. Her shoulders would rise, her voice would get higher, and she'd start fidgeting. She was sending all the wrong signals. When she became aware of this and consciously relaxed her body language, her sales numbers skyrocketed. It's crazy how these subtle things can have such a huge impact, right? And it's not just about making a good impression. It's also about how our body language affects us internally. Studies have shown that even forcing yourself to smile can actually boost your mood. And speaking of mood, let's talk about tone of voice. I mean, you can say the right words, but if your tone is harsh, sarcastic, or dismissive, the message will get lost in translation. Remember that time I accidentally replied all to an email with a super snarky comment? Yeah, not my finest moment. I thought I was being funny, but my tone came across as rude and unprofessional. So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it. A warm, genuine tone of voice can make all the difference in building rapport and conveying empathy.
Now, touch is another powerful nonverbal cue, but it's definitely one that requires extra sensitivity and awareness of personal boundaries. A gentle touch on the arm or a hug can convey warmth and support, but obviously is not appropriate in every situation. And then there's mirroring, which Segal describes as a subtle way of building rapport by subtly matching the other person's body language. If they lean in, you lean in slightly too. If they speak softly, you lower your voice as well. It's like a nonverbal way of saying, hey, we're on the same wavelength. I used to think all this nonverbal stuff was just woo, new age, mumbo jumbo. But the more I learn about it, the more I realize it's actually backed by science. Segal even suggests recording yourself to see how you come across non-verbally. I know it sounds a little cringy, but I actually tried it and it was super enlightening. I had no idea. I have this habit of touching my face every 5 seconds when I'm nervous. So if you're really serious about improving your nonverbal communication skills, I highly recommend giving that a try. It's like holding up a mirror to your communication style and seeing what needs adjusting.
But, all this focus on technique and analysis can sometimes make communication feel like a chore, right? We're constantly overthinking every interaction. And that's where Segal's next skill comes in, playfulness. Now, I'll admit, when I first saw this in the book, I was like, playfulness? What does that have to do with communication? But Segal makes a really compelling case for it. It turns out that laughter and play aren't just fun. They're actually essential for healthy relationships. They help us connect on a deeper level, diffuse tension, and build trust. Plus, who doesn't love a good laughter? I mean, think about the people in your life who you genuinely enjoy spending time with. chances are they're the ones who make you laugh, who bring a sense of joy and lightness to your interactions, right? It's like their energy is just contagious. Segal shares this great example in the book about this law firm of all places where the partners start each day with a laugh fest. They tell jokes, share funny stories, just let loose for a bit. And guess what? They have amazing morale. They resolve conflicts easily, and they're incredibly productive. Who knew, right?
And it's not just about goofing off at work. Segal emphasizes the importance of incorporating playfulness into all our relationships. It could be as simple as playing with your pet, watching a funny movie with your partner, or just finding the humor in everyday situations. You know how sometimes you just need to step back from a tense situation and inject a little levity? Humor can be such a powerful tool for diffusing conflict and bringing people together.
Yeah.
I remember the time I was having a huge fight with my sister about, of all things, who got to keep our childhood stuffed animals. Yeah, it was getting pretty heated. But then out of nowhere, she started making these hilarious voices for each of the animals, and we both just burst out laughing. The tension was gone, and we were able to actually talk things out like adults. So humor can be like this magic wand that transforms a tense situation into something, well, funny. And when we can laugh together, it creates this sense of connection and understanding that's so crucial for healthy relationships.
But here's the thing. Segal also cautions against using humor to avoid dealing with real issues. Like if you're constantly joking to cover up your own stress or sadness, that's not really playfulness, it's avoidance. And ultimately, it'll backfire. So it's all about finding that balance, using humor to lighten up, but also being willing to address the serious stuff when you need to. Okay, so we've covered managing stress, emotional awareness, nonverbal communication, and playfulness. Now it's time to tackle the big one, conflict resolution. Because, let's be real, disagreements are inevitable in any relationship. It's how we handle those disagreements that makes all the difference. And that's where Segal's velvet hammer approach comes in. The idea is to be assertive about your needs while still being respectful and understanding of the other person's perspective. It's about finding solutions that work for both of you, not about winning or losing.
One of the keys to conflict resolution is understanding that we all have different needs, and those needs are totally valid. Like in the book, there's this example of these two women who are sharing an office. One needs quiet to concentrate, while the other likes to listen to music. Total clash, right? But instead of getting into a huge fight, they talk it out and find a compromise. Headphones for the music lover. A small fan for the quiet seeker. See, it's all about communication, understanding, and a willingness to compromise. And sometimes it takes a little creativity to find those win-win solutions. Like, remember that time my partner and I were planning a vacation, totally butting heads? I'm a total beach bum, while they're more of an adventure seeker. We were going back and forth, getting nowhere until we finally hit on the idea of doing a split vacation. A few days relaxing on the beach, followed by a few days hiking and exploring, best of both worlds. Now, Segal also emphasizes that conflict resolution isn't always appropriate. Like in situations involving abuse or threats to safety, your priority should always be protecting yourself.
But for those everyday disagreements that inevitably pop up in our relationships, the velvet hammer approach can be a total game changer. It's about turning conflict into an opportunity to actually strengthen your bond, rather than letting it tear you apart. So how do we actually do this velvet hammer thing? Well, Segal breaks it down into 4 key steps, and I think these are so helpful. Okay, so Segal breaks down this whole velvet hammer thing, into 4 key steps. And they're surprisingly simple, but so powerful when you actually put them into practice, So first up, stay calm and focused. Remember all that stuff we talked about earlier about managing stress? Yeah, it comes into play big time here. Because when you're all stressed out, it's just harder to think clearly and to empathize with the other person and to really listen to what they're trying to say. I mean, think about it. Have you ever tried to have a serious conversation when you're hangry? It doesn't usually end well, right? So step 1 is all about creating that space where you can actually have a productive conversation.
And that leads right into step 2. Listen with empathy. This means really trying to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. It's about putting yourself in their shoes and trying to see the world through their eyes and acknowledging their feelings. Even if you think they're totally off base. I know it's easier said than done, right? Especially when you feel like you're in the right play. But trust me, this step is crucial. And once you've really listened to the other person, it's time for step 3. Communicate clearly and respectfully. This means using I statements to express your needs without blaming or attacking. So instead of saying, "You always do this," you might say, "I feel hurt when this happens." It's a subtle shift, but it makes a huge difference in how your message is received. It's about taking ownership of your feelings and expressing them in a way that invites dialogue rather than defensiveness. And finally, step 4. Be willing to compromise. Because let's be real, it's rarely about winning or losing. It's about finding solutions that work for both of you.
And that often means being willing to let go of your need to be right and to meet in the middle and to, maybe even try something you wouldn't have considered before. Reading this section of the book really got me thinking about this recent conflict I had with a coworker. We were working on this project together and we had totally different ideas about how to approach it. And I was convinced my way was the best way. Surprise, surprise. And I was getting super frustrated that they weren't seeing things my way. But then I remembered Segal's velvet hammer approach. So I took a deep breath, tried to really listen to their perspective. And guess what I realized? They had some really valid points. We ended up coming up with a solution that incorporated both of our ideas, and honestly, the project turned out even better than I could have imagined. Reading this book has made me realize that conflict isn't something to be feared. It's actually an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and our needs and the people we care about. And when we approach conflict with this mindset, curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to compromise can actually be a catalyst for deeper, more meaningful connections. But there's one more element that I think is essential for resolving conflict. And I don't think it's explicitly mentioned in the book. It's this: being able to recognize when it's simply not the right time to engage in a serious discussion. Think about it. Have you ever tried to have a crucial conversation when you or the other person are exhausted or hangry or just plain stressed out?
Yeah.
It usually doesn't end well. Recognizing these less than ideal moments for what they are can save a ton of heartache and frustration down the line. Timing, my friend, timing. Sometimes the most powerful move is knowing when to hit pause and come back to the table when everyone's feeling more grounded and receptive. It's like that classic advice: never go to bed angry. And honestly, it applies to so much more than just bedtime. So before you launch into that next big talk, take a moment to check in with yourself and the other person. Are you both calm? Are you both present? Do you both have the emotional bandwidth to truly listen and engage? If the answer is no, it's totally okay to postpone the conversation. It doesn't mean you're avoiding conflict. It just means you're choosing the right moment to tackle it. And honestly, that's a pretty powerful form of emotional intelligence, don't you think? So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the importance of early attachment to the 5 essential skills for emotionally intelligent communication to Segal's brilliant velvet hammer approach to conflict resolution. It's a lot to process, but I hope you're walking away with some valuable insights that you can start applying to your own life. Because here's the thing: mastering nonverbal communication is a lifelong journey. It's not about memorizing a bunch of tips and tricks. It's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and how we connect with others. It's about paying attention to that silent language we all speak, the language of our bodies, our emotions, our energy. And the rewards are huge. When we learn to communicate effectively, we can transform our relationships. We can build trust, deepen intimacy, and create connections that are truly authentic and fulfilling. So what unspoken messages are you sending? And how can you use this knowledge to build deeper, more authentic connections with the people who matter most? I'll leave you with those questions. And remember, you have the power to transform your relationships one nonverbal cue at a time. Until next time, keep diving deep.